Hi, we are Group 4. We're going to be presenting on the Wells Fargo incident. I'm Mark Perez, but we also have Joel Dunstan, Ian Kicklider, Maria Duarte Rivas, and Leilani Calix. So, to begin with, regarding the incident, who were they and who were their auditors? So, in this case, the organization was Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo is a multinational financial services company based in the United States. It is one of the largest and oldest banks in the country, with a history dating back to 1852 when it was founded in San Francisco during the California Gold Rush. The bank's name is derived from its founders, Henry Wells and William Fargo. Wells Fargo provides a wide range of financial services, including banking, mortgages, investing, credit cards, insurance, and other related services. It operates a vast network of branches and ATMs throughout the United States and has a significant presence in the global financial market. Over the years, Wells Fargo has grown through mergers and acquisitions, becoming a major player in the banking industry. The bank has faced both successes and challenges, and it has been involved in various controversies, including issues related to customer accounts, regulatory compliance, and corporate governance. Next, who were their auditors? So their auditors were KPMG, Kleinbell, Pete, Morwick, Golderler. KPMG is a global network of professional services firms that provide audit, tax, and advisory services. The name KPMG stands for Kleinveld P. Marwick Golderler, which reflects the merger of several accounting firms that ultimately led to the formation of the current organization. In 1987, KMG and Pete Marwick Mitchell and Co. merged to create KPMG. This merger formed one of the big four accounting firms, which are the four largest and most influential accounting firms and professional services firms globally. KPMG conducts audits of financial statements for a wide range of clients, including publicly traded companies, private businesses, and nonprofit organizations. These audits are designed to provide assurance on the accuracy and reliability of financial information. KPMG offers tax advisory and compliance services to help navigate complex tax regulations, minimize tax liabilities, and ensure compliance with tax laws. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Joel and I will be presenting this next section. Firstly, what fraud did Wells Fargo commit? Let's start with some background information of fraud. Wells Fargo's fraud all came to light in late 2016. Employees have been creating fake bank accounts and other banking services without their customers' knowledge since at least 2011. It has become known as the cross-selling scandal and has been determined that Wells Fargo created roughly 3.5 million fake bank accounts without their customers' knowledge or approval. This cross-selling of fake bank accounts constitutes consumer fraud. However, because of the revenues that Wells Fargo was recording from fees associated with the fake accounts, the management of Wells Fargo was actually committing financial reporting fraud. This brings me to my next point. How did Wells Fargo commit this fraud? Under pressure from their upper management to cross-sell the bank's products and meet unrealistic quotas, Wells Fargo employees started to create the fake accounts to meet the demands made of them. They would set up fake accounts by using existing customers' account information and identities without the permission or awareness of the customers. Wells Fargo employees would open a number of different accounts, from checking accounts and saving accounts to credit cards, insurance, and even mortgages. Many of these accounts would have fees associated with them and would in turn incur even more fees, such as overdraft fees, as customers were unaware to transfer or deposit money into these accounts. In order to avoid being detected, Wells Fargo employees would often use their own contact information on applications so that customers would be unaware of the account opened under their name. The Wells Fargo employees would also illegally move money between customers' accounts to avoid fees and ensure their fraud would go undetected. Now for the final part of my presentation. What part did the auditors play in the fraud? As Mark mentioned, KPMG were the auditors for the duration of the fraud. KPMG had been auditors for Wells Fargo for 85 years. Although there's no duty to change auditing firms, only the engagement partners, there is still a chance of familiarity that comes with being contracted for so long. In this case, KPMG improperly relied on materials directly provided by Wells Fargo and the law firms. However, the biggest part that KPMG played in this fraud was they detected the fraud as early as 2013, but found it did not meet the materiality standard. If KPMG had acted on their findings by reporting the illegal activities to the auditing committee, and then to relevant authorities when no action was taken to correct the fraud, many more Wells Fargo customers could have avoided the fraud. Thank you for watching, and I'll pass you on to Ian.
We need to talk about why Wells Fargo committed this fraud. And to do so, we need to talk about the 3 stars that make up the constellation we know as the fraud triangle, which is made up of the 3 stars: pressure, opportunity, and rationalization. A pressure is what would allow someone to commit a fraud, an incentive or a push. Then we need an opportunity, a moment or moments in which a fraud can be committed without the foreseen risk of being caught. And lastly, a rationalization, a line of thinking used to convince oneself or others that such actions are permissible. Now let's talk about their pressures involved. Management was checking in numerous times per day about daily sales targets and quotas, punishing employees who lagged behind and made them stay late and work weekends, and carrying over any task they could not finish to the next day. Failure to meet their standards after 2 months would result in them being fired. But on the other end of the spectrum, if they did well, they could financially enrich themselves. All of this was in service of their aggressive sales targets. Wells Fargo was setting goals so high that managers literally did not have enough staff and were forcing their current employees to try and pick up the workload. Even though Wells Fargo already had 4 times the industry average per household at 6.15 financial products. But they wanted more. They wanted the Great 8, or 8 financial products per household, an astounding metric. Now let's talk about the opportunities that would have led them to commit this fraud. Quite simply, there was an inadequate monitoring of internal controls and a lack of internal controls to begin with. Wells Fargo employees were able to simply sign up customers for services they didn't want and lie about them to the customers so they couldn't cancel. Meanwhile, the company collected the fees from providing such services and was enriched. Now, what would have allowed an employee to convince themselves this was the right thing to do? Well, quite simply, it was the poor tone at the top. You see, management wasn't concerned with the journey to the Great 8, but the destination. They wanted to achieve this great standard at any cost, and were willing to push their employees and lower management as hard as was necessary to achieve it. So much so that their low-level employees violated something that was called out in their employee handbook, something they should have known that they shouldn't have done. Let's relate this back to the fraud triangles we know it already. You have managerial pressure, financial incentives, aggressive sales targets, inadequate internal controls and poor monitoring, and management obsessed with the Great 8 standard instead of the customer trust and loyalty that could have gotten them there. Let's relate this to Kohlberg's stages of moral development. At what stage do you think that the lower management and lower level employees were working at? I put forward that they were working as high as stage 3 at most. Losing their jobs could have put the employee and those they are responsible for at financial risk, and doing well would have allowed them to avoid punishment and abuse by upper management. But for the executive staff and upper management, at most stage 2. They were conducting themselves in a way that only benefited themselves, and had very little regard for the morality of how those rewards were achieved. In this case, there might have been a concern about punishment, but they did not foresee the consequences of their actions and proceeded to act accordingly.
How were the fake accounts discovered? Well, it wasn't because managers of the community bank, auditors, or Wells Fargo on board of directors took any action upon finding out. The curtain fell after the publication of a newspaper article stating that Wells Fargo had an unhealthy sales culture. First, I will discuss the early red flags of this unethical behavior. The first red flag, and more important, was excessive pressure senior executives put on the employees to achieve sales targets, which led their employees to engage in unethical conduct. Rumors about the aggressive tactics used by Wells Fargo employees to meet their daily cross-selling targets were another red flag, plus the 30 employees who were fired. These rumors began circulating in 2013. Now I will discuss how management and top executives always knew what their employees were doing to achieve the 8 grade. According to the Office of Public Affairs 2020, in 2002, top managers of the community bank were aware of the employees' unethical practices. In 2004, one internal investigator called the problem a growing flag. The next year, another internal investigator said that the problem was spreading out. However, senior managers in the community bank refused to act, even though they knew about the wrongdoing. In fact, they minimized the problem to Wells Fargo management and its board of directors by casting the problem as driven by individual misconduct. They also viewed the unethical practices as merely the cost of doing business. Also, Wells Fargo auditors knew about the wrongdoing, but they thought that those practices were no material, so they didn't report it. Now that I have talked about how those with the power to take action against the fraudulent practices decided to minimize the situation, I will talk about the newspaper article responsible for revealing the unhealthy sales culture that Wells Fargo was promoting. The article was published by the Los Angeles Times on December 2016. It was titled, "Wells Fargo's Pressure Cooker Sales Culture Comes at a Cost." The article was written by Rickard, and he claims that Wells Fargo had an unhealthy sales culture. The article describes how employees were pressured to meet their sales targets and what the consequences were if they failed. It also contains several testimonies of anonymous Wells Fargo ex-employees. Those testimonies describe the shenanigans at Wells Fargo and how they got fired or retaliated against for reporting them to their bosses. It also contains some testimonies from customers who were victims of the fraud. It mentions several lawsuits against the bank for unethical practices and how the bank denied the wrongdoing at that time. Therefore, after hearing all these details, and according to Cam Wright from the Seven Pillars Institute, the fraud was discovered as a result of the article published by the Los Angeles Times in 2013. This article called the federal regulators' attention, who began investigations into the bank that same year. However, it took 3 years until Wells Fargo finally admitted the unethical practices made by its employees, and it was on September 8, 2016, when the world knew about the shenanigans at Wells Fargo.
Hi everyone, I'm Leilani and I'll be talking about the fines and sanctions that Wells Fargo faced, as well as what happened to the people in the firm and where they are now. Wells Fargo suffered fines and sanctions after the criminal investigation revealed the false records and identity theft that was going on. They were given a deferred prosecution agreement, which meant that they wouldn't be prosecuted during the 3-year term of the agreement so long as they abided by certain conditions and cooperated with further government investigations. The company also entered into a civil settlement agreement, which listed a $3 billion fine to resolve both their criminal and civil liabilities. Other fines and settlements are listed, showing where the specific amounts had gone toward. Since the scandal broke, there have been about 5,300 employees terminated. Several top executives were also forced to resign, and they encountered significant legal and regulatory consequences, including criminal charges for fraud and conspiracy. I've listed out 11 major executives, which include former chairman and CEO John Stumpf, former head of the community banking division Carrie Tolstead, as well as other officers, heads, directors, and auditors of the company. These include Claudia Russ Anderson, James Struther, David Julian, Paul McLinko, Hope Hardison, Michael Laughlin, Matthew Rafelson, Kenneth Zimmerman, and Tracy Kidd. In 2017, Wells Fargo announced that they were clawing back a total of $75 million from John Stumpf and Carrie Tolstead. In January 2020, the OCC issued a notice of charges against 5 former senior bank executives and announced settlements with others. Stumpf was given a prohibition order and fined $17.5 million civil money penalty, abbreviated as CMP on the slide. Personal cease and desist orders, which is abbreviated as PC&D, and civil money penalties of different amounts were also made against Hardison and Laughlin. The monetary amounts are shown in blue. Next is a list of recommended decisions and relief sought by the OCC. These charges sought prohibition orders, PC&Ds, and/or CMPs from Tolstead, Anderson, Julian, and McLinko. In September, CMPs, PC&Ds, and/or prohibition orders were made against Rafelson, Zimmerman, and Kidd. In January 2021, the OCC announced a PC&D and CMP against Struther as well. A public hearing was given for Tolstead, Anderson, Struther, Julian, and McLinko on September 13, 2021 in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and it concluded on January 6, 2022. In December of 2022, a public executive summary of recommended decisions was given. It stated that sufficient cause had been shown to justify recommending the issuance of orders assessing millions of dollars of CMPs against Ms. Russ Anderson, Mr. Julian, Mr. McLinko. In March 2023, Carrie Tolstead consented to a prohibition order and a civil money penalty of $17 million by the OCC. In May of the same year, she was charged an additional $3 million civil penalty for a settlement with the SEC. On top of this, she agreed to pay disgorgement and prejudgment interest. The SEC will use this money toward distributing it to harmed investors. The monetary amounts are found in blue in the second footnote. The most recent update on Tolstead comes from a couple of months ago in September of 2023. She faced criminal charges but never went to prison. Instead, she was sentenced by a federal judge in Los Angeles to 3 years probation, 6 months of home confinement, 120 hours of community service, and a token fine of $100,000. This concludes our presentation on the scandal of Wells Fargo. We hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.